can believe anything you want to
All
believe.
your accidents.
But the question is, why do you believe what you believe? And if you tell me there is no God, and then you talk about love as being more than a chemical reaction, you're an intellectual hypocrite. Because if you're a naturalist, if you're an atheist, you have reduced reality to matter and energy, which means love is simply a chemical reaction. So tell your girlfriend, I don't...
Unless you can scientifically prove something to me, then I won't believe it. Then this is my faith.
Yeah, that's
but
your
science
faith.
is based on a series of tests to try to prove something. It's not a final answer. But it's more than saying, well, since I don't understand, then obviously, I just don't know. That's faith in something.
The statement, unless you can scientifically prove something, it's not true, is a philosophy.
Is that a philosophy?
No, that would be empiricism. That's facts. Philosophy.
I have another question. Earlier you were saying something about morality as a general being a proof for God. I didn't quite understand that. What if it's just a function of society?
If it's just a function of society,
Well, yeah, because
then morality is relative.
hundreds of years ago, what was acceptable then is not necessarily acceptable now. Like in Rome, you could have slaughtered a good amount of people and have been all right, depending on who it was. Now you can't really do that. You know what I mean? So we have now certain laws that dictate, it's not good to kill that amount of people. What up? That many people, you know what I mean? So I don't quite understand what you mean by a universal morality. I've never seen that to be true. I mean, like in a state of nature, right? If I was going after survival, I wouldn't have a problem maybe killing a guy and feeding my children. Now, in a society where there's law, that wouldn't be acceptable. You know that you have to treat your fellow human being a certain way so that society runs smoothly. So why is morality universal?
Do you believe that if Nazi Germany would have won World War II?
Everybody always brings up the Nazis. What is this?
What if you just say yes?
Ma'am,
Okay,
I was
fine,
trying
go.
to answer your
I'm
question.
sorry, I apologize. Go.
If Nazi Germany would have won World War II, would that mean that the Holocaust is good?
What?
That
No.
would never mean that.
Okay, why is the
That
Holocaust
has
wrong?
nothing to do with that, though.
Why is the Holocaust wrong? Because it's immoral. Okay, who defines
speaking-
morality?
We're also speaking in a time frame now where we have law that also defines that kind of thing.
Where on earth do you get off saying that your particular laws of your culture are right and the Nazis are wrong? How on earth can you remain intact with your rational mind and say,
I'm saying
my morality is right of my culture, but the Nazis' morality is wrong? Why? Because I assert that my morality is right and the Nazis are wrong. If there is no God, morality is created by the individual, by society, which means it's totally relative. But if there is a God, then it's possible that there are some moral absolutes. But if there's no God, morality is all relative. Now, can we agree on that or not?
No.
Okay. What is the basis of a moral absolute if there is no God?
We don't know. It could have been an invisible hand process, like invented by an incredibly intelligent God who decided that we should develop a subjective process for ourselves.
You can't prove God doesn't exist, but you can't prove He exists either.
Yeah.
Which is the same exact ground I think you're holding, is that everything's relative. That man creates individually everything that has ever been created on this planet has been a product of that which man has created. You can't prove that a God made anything.
Can you prove anything in life?
You can't prove anything.
Thank you.
There's a
Does
lot
that
of
mean you
scientific
just
proof of, like,
arbitrarily make
chemical
decisions, or do you look for evidence?
Well, you have to take what you're given on this planet. I mean, everything you have around you, all the elements, all the forces that push you around, you make conclusions. I mean, I'm an engineer, and what I do is I take what I know, and I can make things, I can make machines, and I can try to benefit that which I have, but nothing's absolute ever.
Okay. So you base your decisions on evidence, not proof.
Exactly.
And the evidence is that God exists.
What evidence is that?
Everything that has a beginning has a cause. The universe has a beginning, therefore the universe has a cause.
Really?
How do
Yeah.
you know that?
How do you know?
You don't know either.
The Big Bang.
You can't prove that.
Really?
The Big Bang shows us the universe is not eternal, it has a beginning.
Did that happen in the Big Bang?
Yeah, about 15 billion years ago. The evidence from astronomy is...
No, I agree that it didn't happen, but I just...
Then why are you arguing with me about it?
Well, no, I'm not arguing about it. I mean, your stance is that everything's relative. Anything could happen, right?
No.
No?
If there is no God, morality is relative.
But if there is no God and morality is subject to certain labels.
Second piece of evidence for God's existence is, you as an engineer know, that order and design does not come about by chance.
Evolution.
Well, the obvious question is there a mind behind evolution or is there no mind?
Well, evolution states that things happen pseudo-randomly. I mean, how did life spawn out of a rock? Nothing, by chance.
That's another third piece of evidence for God's existence. Life does not come about from non-life by chance.
There are definitely logical systems where there's paraconsistency, where truth and falsity aren't mutually exclusive.
Like what?
Logical systems where that's the case, as opposed to instead of binary values where something is either false or true, that it can be true and false, or neither.
Okay, when can A and non-A be equally true in the same way at the same time?
If you write out the starred sentence is true, and you star that sentence, it's both true and false, or neither true nor false.
What?
Do you not? All right. If I had some paper, I could show you. This, if I wrote out on a chalkboard, say, the starred sentence is false, and I starred it, then it's the starred sentence is false, but that makes the sentence true. But it's both true and false at the same time. Yes, it is.
How's it true? What's the point you're trying to make?
That your logical system, your whole example there of a professor saying something is true and false being based on absolute is not right.
No, I put forward the law of non-contradiction. That A and non-A cannot both be true in the same way at the same time. You disagree with that?
It might not be true.
Well, I know that. I might be a bad dream you're having right now. Anything's possible.
Well, see, you throw
But
away
what does
like
the evidence point to? The evidence points to the law of non-contradiction being correct. The evidence points to you and me standing here having a conversation. And guess what you're using? The same thing I'm using. You're using speech and logic and reason to communicate with me.
Exactly, and you're using that to try and define a system when there isn't a whole lot of evidence for it. There is no evidence for a God.
Of course there's evidence that God exists. Order and design. Point to a designer.
Well, what about in evolution? How come that's not?
What about it?
How is that not?
Evolution has nothing to do with what I just said.
Yeah, you said order and design. All right, how about order and design in biology? And there, you take theories like creationism and intelligent design, and those are all negative evidence theories where they have no positive evidence for them, only small problems in evolution to back them up.
Sure, evolution is just a process, so the question still remains, is there an intelligent mind behind the process, or is there no intelligent mind behind the process?
You're right, but it's not necessitated. Evolution doesn't necessitate an intelligent designer, so that's, once again, your evidence is poor, I would say.
Fine. If you believe that designer genes don't have a designer behind them, if you believe that a BMW can come together as a result of a cyclone passing through a metal scrapyard, if you believe that oxygen, which is 21% of our atmosphere, if it was 25%, fires would break out all over the place. If it was 15%, we'd all suffocate. If you think that that kind of complexity can come about by chance,
absolutely,
I got to tell you, I can't be so gullible. Because everything in my experience is order and design and complexity of that nature demands an intelligent mind.
So you're saying there's no chance ever? That there's no
Sure.
chance for
anything's possible. It's possible I'm a
like
bad
that.
dream you're having, okay? But the evidence is I'm real, the evidence is you're real. That's why we're continuing this conversation. At least that's why I am. So I don't base my life on proof, but I base my life on evidence. And the evidence is, sir, you don't get complexity by chance. You don't get intelligent communication by chance. It demands an intelligent mind. The amount of DNA in a single cell demands a creator. How can you have so much densely packed information without an intelligent mind.
I feel like it's just someone who can't comprehend.
That's the
chance.
argument from incredulity. Basically, you don't know how it could happen, so you say God must have done it.
No, there was
Yes.
an argument from experience.
No,
my
that's
experience
terrible.
is,
All right.
if I'm walking down the beach and I see ripples in the sand, and you ask me, hey dude, how'd the ripples get there? And I say the waves did it.
Experience
If we
isn't a good-
keep on walking down and we see John loves Mary written in the sand, and you say, hey dude, how'd that get there? And I say, because the waves made it. That's absurd. Why? Because John loves Mary is qualitatively different from ripples in the sand. I have seen life come from life. Never once have you or I seen life come from non-life. An atheist and agnostic is saying life can come from non-life. There is not one observation of that by anybody.
Excuse, I'm
But you still believe it. That's blind, gullible faith.
Dude, sir.
I can't have that much faith.
Sir,
I only see life come from life. I never see life come from non-life.
If man has free will and he's able to make decisions on his own. For instance, I made the decision to talk to you right now.
Right.
Now, God is infallible without fault. He doesn't see time as a, same conquest as us. It's like an open book for him.
Right.
Sees everything as one plane. So he already knows I'm going to make my decision to talk to you.
Yep.
So in reality, this is something that's already been planned out. God already knows which way I'm going, what I'm going to say to you, which way I'm going to turn.
Yep.
So in reality, man doesn't have free will because this is something that God already knows and understands to be planned. Would
Good
that be
question.
correct?
Very hard question. When we say that God is all-knowing, we do not mean that God writes on a piece of paper what you and I are going to do tomorrow, locks it in a bank vault, and then you and I have to do what's on the paper tomorrow.
Right.
Instead, what we mean is, due to God's perspective outside of the dimension of time, God is eternal. God is not locked into the dimension of time the
Right.
way you and I are.
Right.
He is in a position to see what you and I will freely choose tomorrow.
Right, but isn't that contradictory? Isn't that a circular logic? For instance, if God knows where I'm going to end up right now in 10 years, would you
Yeah.
agree that God knows right now where I'm going to be in 10 years?
Right.
He can see that.
Right.
Would you agree with that?
Yep.
Okay. So any decisions that I make up until that point to get me where I'm going to be in 10 years have already been knowledgeable to God, because he could drop back and say from 5 years he's going to be in here, from 5 minutes he's going to be here, and 1 second he's going to be here. So in
Right.
reality, although we comprehend our own free will, this is something that's already understood by God. So if God really is infallible and without fault, then man doesn't have free will.
God is omnipresent, which means God can be in Storrs, Connecticut and Calcutta, India at the same time.
Right.
Why? Because God is outside of the dimension of space. He's not limited by space.
Right.
Which means God does not have a torso, a head, 2 arms,
Exactly.
and 2 legs.
Right. Yeah, I understand. that.
Because he is outside of the dimension of space, God can be in Calcutta, India, London, England, and Storrs, Connecticut at the same time.
Right.
Similarly, because God is outside of the dimension of time, God is eternal.
Okay.
God looks at all of history at a glance. Therefore, due to his perspective outside of time,
Yep.
God sees what you and I will freely choose to do tomorrow.
But so he knows what we're going to do.
Because he's outside
Right, yeah, I understand
of the
that, but I'm just
dimension of
saying-
time.
Right, so there's a entity, which we will call God. No, I'm not trying to put it into a human form. We'll call this entity God. So this godly form knows where we're going to be, like you said, at any time, in any place, and any space. So in reality, actions we make here are not free will, but they're actions that are already understood by God. He knows if I'm going to talk to you or if I'm not going to talk to you. And by knowing that, doesn't that take away man's free will altogether?
No. If I watch a movie twice,
I understand
and if
that,
I
but-
see the actions in the second time I watch the movie, and I know what he's going to do next, I knew what Dustin Hoffman or Tom Cruise or Liam Neeson is going to do next, it doesn't mean that I'm forcing him to do it.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying he's forcing you to, I'm saying, but all I'm saying is that wouldn't any decision we make or any action we make on Earth already be known by God? Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay, so although that we have the free will, as you would say, to make those decisions, aren't those decisions by already being known in reality not really free will? We're not making this decision of where we're going to go because this is already predestined to where we're going to end up.
Okay. I can watch my little child reach out to touch a red hot stove.
Yeah.
I know that when that finger touches that red hot stove, it's going to recoil in pain. Just because I know that doesn't mean I am making the child touch the red hot stove and get burned.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Just because I have knowledge that something's going to happen does not mean that I'm forcing it to happen.
Okay. I understand what you're saying.
What do you think about Christ?
I don't want to get into the whole thing. To tell you the truth, I think I just, like he said, I follow a lot of, basic Christian Catholic values. I think that I'm taking my own free will to kind of make different decisions. I've read a lot of the Bible. There are some things that I just couldn't comprehend all-powerful, loving God to think with some other people. I believe that humans are all equal. I think that we all do have, flaws, obviously, like you said. But I think that, with God, if there is a God, I believe there is, being all-loving nature, that he wouldn't necessarily want us to, Leviticus 20:13, have the blood of a homosexual man spewed around the land. I don't necessarily think that would be a loving God's nature.
Good. And so Jesus didn't do that, did he?
Oh, I'm not saying he did, no, but
Right.
Jesus is the Son of God, and in reality, Jesus would be the equivalent of God. If you have that.
Good. So you believe that Jesus was God?
I'm saying if he was, though, I'm saying.
Uh-huh.
He would have to be. If he's the Son of God, he would have to be God. One and the same
Good.
entity.
One and the same thing.
Right.
And doesn't his resurrection from the dead point to him being God?
Not necessarily.
I think that if everything in the Bible is correct, then I think that without a doubt, yeah, he would be one with God, definitely.
Okay.
It's like water, steam.
So do you think the historical evidence point to Christ having risen from the dead?
I think there's definitely historical evidence in the area, but like I'm saying, I believe that the Bible is written by man. I think that man is at fault. So I don't think that taking everything in the Bible as absolute truth is necessarily what a God that would give us free will would want us necessarily to do. Okay,
so what test do you use to determine what parts of the Bible are accurate and what parts are inaccurate?
I don't put it to a test at all. I tell you, if it was going to be put to a test, I think it'd be my own gut moral instinct. And if I am taking the test of my own gut moral instinct, and God has created me, then I guess I'm doing something right.
Good, so you're on the right path. But I think that we can get downright brilliant when it comes to rationalizing whatever we want to do. So I think it's pretty healthy if God has given us a plumb line that we can measure our consciences, our gut with. Like the Ten Commandments, like the Sermon on the Mount. And if you really are wanting to know truth, and if you really believe that God exists, it's well worth our time to search after him. Jesus said, ask and it shall be given you. Seek and you shall find. Knock and the door shall be open. For everyone who asks receives. He who seeks finds, and to him who knocks the door shall be open. If you spend 4 years here at this fine university, preparing for at most a 60-year career, don't you think it'd be wise to study a bit in preparation for eternity?
I have a question for you. What do you believe of people who believe in other religions? Do you think when they die, how do you think they will be judged?
I have to divide that question into 2 parts. What about those who've heard about Christ? What about those who've not heard about Christ? Sure. Jesus never answers the question, how is God going to judge those who never heard about Christ? So I don't know. But Jesus and the Bible make 5 points that apply to that issue. God is just. Nobody's getting ripped off. The only reason people go to hell is because they choose to live their life separate from God, and on the day of judgment, God grants their request. Thirdly, there are going to be a truckload of people in heaven who never heard the word Jesus. Hebrews chapter 11 lists some of these people by name. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Rahab, a Gentile prostitute. Never heard the word Jesus, but in humility, they put their faith in God. Fourthly, the only reason those folks will be in heaven, the only reason any of us will be in heaven, Christ claimed, is because he bled and died on a cross to pay the penalty for our wrongdoing. And fifthly, although I do not know specifically how God will judge those who have never heard about Christ, I do know that all of us here have more than ample opportunity to read the Gospels, to decide what are we going to do with Christ. In the Quran, We read, Jesus is a good prophet, he is not God. The problem is the historical Jesus claimed to be God.
It's to be an internal contradiction is on one page it says something, on a different page it says something else. Like the gentleman that left mentioned about the creation.
You're
how
right.
creation came
The
about.
Quran
That's
does
an
not
internal
contradict itself. I agree.
So then
But
we'll
it
go to point number two.
contradicts
Point number
the
two.
historical evidence that Jesus claimed to be God.
Claimed. From what, John and Joseph and Mike and whoever.
That's right, man. And that's the only thing. That's the only way I can know anything historically. Historical knowledge is based on the trustworthiness of eyewitness testimony.
So then why take what John and those people said 500 years before what Muhammad came with?
That's exactly why I trust John, because he lived with Jesus. Muhammad was the dude who never met Jesus.
doesn't it
John
come-
met Jesus, listened to Jesus.
But doesn't it come with time that things like that become more inaccurate? Jesus' book isn't here. Jesus' book is not here.
Yes, the Gospels
The
of
same
Matthew,
way.
Mark, Luke, and John
The
were
same-
written in the first century.
Okay, Moses' book, the
Eyewitnesses.
Torah.
That's what I want when it comes to historical
Moses'
knowledge.
book, the Torah, right? Did Jesus believe in the Torah? Did Jesus follow Moses?
Yes, Jesus believed the Torah was the Word of God, very
So
clearly.
then why do you accept Jesus as a successor of Moses and you don't accept Muhammad as a successor of Jesus?
Because Muhammad contradicted Jesus.
But you don't have any way to tell whether or not what Jesus came with is the exact same as what Moses came with, because the book Moses came with is not the same today as it was at the time. Can you agree with me on that?
No, that made no sense
Yes,
to me.
of
I'm
course
sorry,
it
I'm not
did.
smart enough to figure out
Of
what you
course
just
it
said
did.
there. Makes no sense to me.
Okay,
What
to
on
you,
earth did
right
you just
now,
say?
Right now, the book that Moses came with.
Yes?
Do you agree Jesus
He didn't
memorized
come with
it?
anything. He wrote something.
He didn't write anything. It was revealed to him.
Baloney.
It
Moses
was
wrote.
revealed to him.
No book floated out of
So
heaven
then
to
what
Moses.
makes him a prophet?
Moses wrote.
What makes him a prophet? The fact that he was a self-proclaimed prophet, he was a good writer. There's plenty of good writers. That doesn't make them prophets.
Goodness gracious, man. No way.
What
Do I
is your
accept this
definition of a
kind
prophet?
of floating out of heaven
What?
book that you do?
No one's saying it's floating out of heaven. I
Well, then
told
what are you
it's
saying?
revealed through angels. Do you believe
Moses
angels?
wrote. No, an angel didn't write the Torah.
No one said
Moses
an angel
wrote it.
it.
He
No
wrote it,
one
not an
said
angel.
wrote it.
And no angel wrote the New Testament either. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Peter, James wrote the New Testament.
So what makes someone a prophet? And not a random great writer.
What makes someone a prophet is that God inspires them. And there's absolutely no way that I can show you who a prophet is. If this guy claims to be a prophet, I can't just blindly say, yes, he's a prophet, or no, he's not a prophet. I have to observe how he lives his life. I have to listen to what he believes.
And 500 people for you is good enough for that. As long as 500 people say he's a prophet, we're good. We're golden.
No, that's your argument. I'm not standing
That's
here
what you
saying
said
anybody's
before.
a prophet. Your argument is
Follow me to Scientology!
So again, we'll talk about what makes someone a prophet. Your definition of a prophet, and I'll follow with mine. You said a good writer.
No, I didn't.
But again, so we're
A
all on the
prophet
same
is
page.
someone who's inspired by God, but I can't show you that someone's inspired by God. It's impossible.
So this is something in your own heart.
I can't show you that a book is inspired by God. And don't you understand? That's why it's so
So
hard
then
for you and me to have
it is.
an intelligent conversation.
Okay.
Because you just lapsed into
Can I answer your-
this
can
is
I
inspired
answer
by
your-
God,
can I
this is
answer your
from
thing?
God, this is from an angel.
Well,
Well,
listen.
fine, but there's no way you can show that.
Okay, you're here right now. The purpose of you coming here is to quote unquote guide misguided people. I talked to the people who brought you and they said your point is not to convert people to Christianity. Your point is to get atheists and agnostics to believe in Jesus.
No,
Yeah.
and you. I pray
Well,
you
then-
come to believe
well,
in
then,
Jesus,
I
man.
believe in Jesus. I don't
You
believe
reject
in
him
Jesus
as
how
God.
You,
You don't accept his death on
I
the
believe
cross
in
for your
Jesus.
sin.
Okay, but we'll stop. We'll go here. You're here to take people to believe in Jesus. But you just said right now that you can't explain to someone that a book is inspired by God or someone else is inspired by God. So why are you here?
There is absolutely no way that any human being can prove that any book has been inspired by God.
Then why are you here to tell us to believe in the Bible?
Because I am convinced that to believe in God and to believe in Jesus does not mean you have to first believe that a book is inspired by God.
So I'm supposed
You
to take
cannot
you
blindly
as the
believe
reference
anything
between
in
me
life.
and Jesus?
And to blindly believe that the Quran or the Bible or any book has been inspired by God is such a leap of faith. I'm not asking anybody to do that.
Okay, so can we have the second part of idealize that I explained to you what a prophet is?
Sure.
A prophet is someone who comes with something extraordinary that combats everything at the time in proof of his claim. So many people came claiming they were prophets, and they did things that didn't prove their claim. The prophet Muhammad, first of all, we'll start off with Jesus, who we both agree with. Jesus was born without a father.
How do you know that?
Miracle number one.
How do you know that?
Revealed in the Quran, and when he spoke.
Revealed in the Quran 500 years after the
when
fact.
he spoke-
All of a sudden, because some dude says he was born without a father, you believe it?
Okay, fine. You don't believe that Jesus was born without a father. You don't
I can
believe-
promise you, man, I'm not going to believe Jesus was born without a father because some dude who lived 500 years after Christ writes it in a book.
Okay, so then we'll stop right there. Forget everything about Muhammad. Do Christians believe that Jesus was born without a father?
Yeah, but not because some dude 500 years after the fact wrote it, that's for sure.
But then what do they take as their belief for Jesus being born without a
Because
father?
eyewitnesses who knew Jesus' mother, a woman named Mary, talked with her. They talked with Joseph, and they found out that indeed Mary was a virgin when Jesus was born.
So then we take
It's not something they made up 500 years later.
Okay, so then
It's something that they found from eyewitness talking.
So do we take that? We take Jesus being born without a father as a miracle. That's proof
Yes.
he's a prophet. That's proof he's a prophet, correct?
No.
Why?
Just because a miracle happens doesn't mean the dude's a prophet.
Why?
He could be a false prophet.
So then why
Miracles
don't you,
happen to
why
false
doesn't your
prophets.
mom have a son without a father? What miracles happen to false prophets? We'll go over that right now. What miracles happen to false prophets?
Man, if you get in the occult, you can go to seances, and demonic powers are shown, supernatural powers are shown. You can go a lot of places on this planet.
But
How
we're
are
not
they
talking about
shown?
magic.
How
We're
are they
not talking about
shown?
magic.
How are they shown?
Yeah, how are they shown? Like,
All right, I'll tell you how.
Factually.
You
How
bet.
can you show it in substance?
You bet.
No, answer.
I went to a
Not
prep
just-
school.
No, answer.
I am answering you.
Come on.
I went
Where
to a
can you
prep
find it
school
factually, though?
here in Connecticut, and I had a philosophy professor who went to a seance. And at the seance, the medium told him things about his past that it took him 2 weeks to remember had even occurred. This philosophy professor came
And
to our
psychologists
class.
have done that too with sexual abuse cases where they convince their clients of a history that never happened. So how do you know that's not the case? How can you prove that it's true?
You got to use your brain to figure out whether
Okay,
I'm
so
being
then
irrational
that means
or rational.
that's on the premise that you're using your brain.
Yeah, that is on a premise.
Okay.
That's right.
Okay.
Why are you wasting your time listening to a guy who's just gibbering?
You're in our way.
You're missing This is my problem.
I'm
I'll answer
sorry,
that
I didn't
question.
realize that your
No.
ankle had a chain tied to the brick underneath
I'll
there.
answer that question.
I was under the impression that you chose to be here freely.
He did choose to be
Let me
here.
relieve you if you're being forced to be here.
Oh, I'm not. I'm enjoying
All
your
right.
company.
But listen, my problem
Thank you.
is...
But it's so large to a point where the chance of all of this happening is infinitesimally small. But when you have such a large pool of these accidents, you're bound to get one that succeeds in creating intelligent life.
Okay. So what I hear you saying is you believe life comes from non-life. I'm sorry. I've never seen anything to back that up. What you're telling me is the personal comes from the impersonal. I'm sorry, I've never seen anything to back that up. You're telling me that order and design come out of chaos by chance. I'm sorry, I've never seen anything to back that up. You're telling me that the rational, a thinking mind, comes from the non-thinking, the irrational. I'm sorry, I've never seen anything to back that up. Sir, you have so many miracles you believe in, but the problem is you don't have a miracle maker. That's why I feel you're an intellectual hypocrite, because you're not willing to face the fact that if I believe we're all accidents, life is meaningless, morality is relative, and death is obviously the end. And you got to read Friedrich Nietzsche. He pours scorn on you guys.
By saying that, though, you're saying that all these things that we can't understand, all these things, all these accidents, all the creation of life from non-life, all these things that we can't understand that science has not yet to explain, the only way we could possibly witness something like this happen is because there must be a God.
Sir, it is impossible for science to explain the meaning of life.
The meaning of life is something, it's like beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
No, sir.
The meaning of
it is
life
a
can be
philosophical
lot different for
issue. Therefore, science has nothing ever to say about meaning of life, because it's not a scientific question. It's a philosophical question. Science has nothing to say about right and wrong, because it's not a scientific question. It's a philosophical, theological question.
So what is the meaning of life?
Well, obviously, if there is no God, there is no meaning to life. We just happen. But if there is a God who creates us for a purpose,
what's that purpose?
To love God with your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. That's why God made us. To love God and to love each other.
That sounds like a selfish God.
Yeah, that really does. It sounds like God's conceited if He created us to love Him.
Good. Very good. Who benefits most from me loving God? I do. Who benefits most from me loving other people? I do. The reason that God created me to love Him and to love people is not because God desperately needs my love. It's not that He's insecure and needs me to massage His ego. Rather, it's because He's a loving being who created me to interact with Him, not to be dominated by Him, and to interact with other people. That's why He created us. That's exciting. And guess what? If you'll examine your life, you'll have to admit, yeah, that is the bottom line for me in life, isn't it? My relationships. That's what brings my life joy, meaning. My relationships.
I can believe that without believing God created me. I
know that.
I can associate like the universe as our creators.
You can believe anything you want to believe.
All your accidents.
But the question is, why do you believe what you believe? And if you tell me there is no God, and then you talk about love as being more than a chemical reaction, you're an intellectual hypocrite. Because if you're a naturalist, if you're an atheist, you have reduced reality to matter and energy, which means love is simply a chemical reaction. So tell your girlfriend, I don't really love you in any theoretical sense, but I have chemical reactions that you excite.
Why can't you be spiritual without believing in God?
What does it mean to be spiritual?
Believing in something other than just matter and energy, but you don't have to believe that there is a supreme being. You can still believe in love. You can still get meaning from your life by loving other people, but not loving God.
How on earth do you get a real, intangible value of love if there's no creator? How does that happen? It's impossible, man. Because if there is no God, reality is matter and energy. There's no spirit. You see, when you say there is no God, you're limiting reality. And you're saying, you want to know what real is, Cliff? Real is matter and energy. And I'm saying, guess what? You know better than that. Because although you experience matter and energy, you also experience this innate drive for meaning. Now that doesn't have meaning. And neither does electricity. No meaning there. It takes a conscious mind to understand meaning. And if there's no conscious mind prior to the human mind, then obviously it's the human mind that creates meaning. And if my meaning in life is to date rape, I'm not wrong, I'm not right. It just is. And for you to tell me that there's some absolute meaning in life is totally false. You can create your own meaning, and I can create my own meaning, but we better realize it's a fantasy. It's a prejudice.
So what about religions that believe in many gods and don't believe in one God like you? They get meaning out of life.
And they are consistent. And they are intellectually consistent. But the atheist who says there is no God or gods, but there is meaning in life, is being an intellectual hypocrite. But if you're a theist, be a pantheist, be you a polytheist or a monotheist, it doesn't matter. But if you acknowledge that there is some type of God, then you're right. You can have real ultimate meaning in life.
So if I don't believe in God, but I live a good life, I'm kind, I'm generous, I'm very moral, but I don't believe in God, am I going to hell?
If you're an atheist, why are you concerned about hell?
Well, I'm just wondering from the perspective of someone who does believe in God. If there are people who don't believe in God, but they're good people, do they go to hell?
If you are truly good all the time, 100% of the time, you'll go to heaven. You're a morally perfect person. But if you're like me, someone who tries to do good but too frequently does evil, if you're like me, someone who's chosen to rebel against God, then you wouldn't want to go to heaven, because heaven you have to live together with God. So hell would be better, because in hell you're separated from God. And if you want to be separated from God, He'll grant your request. I'm kneeling here praying that you're going to put your faith in Christ and go to heaven. Yes, ma'am.
Do you think it's impossible for atheists to have morality or just absolute morality?
Thank you.
From a materialistic perspective,
Right.
I think absolute morality, if you're an atheist, you cannot have absolute morality. You can't say, well, there is an absolute code. However, you can have a matter of practical morality, which says, I agree with other people, we're going to call this thing wrong, and we're all going to act as if we're not supposed to do this thing, say murder other people. And generally, it's beneficial for me, because if I follow this, then my neighbors will follow it. Would you consider that to be intellectually consistent? Because from an evolutionary and social perspective, that to me makes sense.
Absolutely.
And I can call things, I can say it's really good for you to give money, and say, sorry, and say, you know, I can say that's really good, and I don't mean that in an absolute sense, but I mean that in a, that's how it makes me feel, and from a practical sense, by evolutionary and social matters,
Exactly.
it's good.
Exactly. But if I come to you as a Nazi saying, my society has agreed that Jews are inferior, need to be gassed. You're not right. I'm not wrong. I'm not right. You're not wrong.
And there is no
It's
way.
all relative.
Yeah, and there is no way I can prove that, as from an atheistic perspective, there isn't. I can say, I think, you know, for empathetic reasons or for how I feel it's wrong, but no, I don't think you can find any atheist who will actually argue that absolutely by some intangible standard it's wrong.
Good. But here's why it's impossible to live that out. If he steals something from me, like my bike or my backpack, when I look him in the face and say, you should not have stolen my bike, you ought not to have stolen my backpack, all of a sudden I'm appealing to this intangible standard outside of him and me. I'm appealing to his conscience and saying, come on, buddy, wake up and smell the coffee.
Are you appealing to an intangible absolute moral, or are you appealing to his empathy, his feelings, and the social standard that's been set up?
I'm appealing to his conscience, which hopefully ties him into moral absolute, that stealing is wrong.
I guess.
When I'm married
No, go ahead.
to a person, I think if you ever marry a person, at times you're going to look that spouse in the face and say, you should not have treated me that way. And whenever you use that word should, you're appealing to an outside standard and saying, I hope that you use your mind and your conscience to inform you that that behavior is wrong. See, that's not coming from atheism. That's coming from a theistic worldview that it says, indeed, there is a standard, and you broke the standard when you treated me that way.
In nature, species who survive are not necessarily the strongest, not necessarily the fastest, not necessarily the smartest, but those most adaptable, sudden, and dramatic change. And if you highly specify, you lose that ability. And it's because we have such a diverse gene pool that random mutation can happen, even in handicapped people, mentally handicapped, physically handicapped, which is why these people are important to the gene pool. I mean, from an entire species standpoint, everyone is very important to the survival of the species.
Great, that's your view. But obviously, the Nazis insisted the Aryan race is a superior breed to other races. That's why we have to wipe them out and get everyone to follow the Aryan way.
And which is why their argument was incorrect, because they were looking so very short-sighted. That as well.
Switching the topic, I'm only wearing black until they make something darker.
Yes.
What does that mean?
It means it's hilarious and I like to wear it.
Very good. What do you think of Jesus Christ?
Well, I think he was a man, and I think that even by secular definition, he was a saint. I mean, he was probably a fantastic person. If I went back in time and met him, I would say, you're an incredible person. I believe your next question would be, do I believe in God? I wouldn't say that I do. I wouldn't say that I'm an atheist, however. I do think that there's more to the superstructure of the universe than we even think is there. I think that maybe the idea of what I believe in is something that other people could call God, but that's not the way I like to look at it.
Okay, now this Jesus who you respect so highly, obviously he claimed to be God.
Okay.
How do you handle that?
I believe that the idea of God, if you want to define it as God, I like to think of it as a more abstract idea and say that yes, this sort of idea is there. And I think it's a part of all of us. And someone so saintly as Jesus could rightly say that he is God. And, you know, I mean, it's sort of like the proof is in the pudding sort of thing, that he was such a good person. And, you know, I mean, because he just wanted to teach people to be good to other people and to teach them how to live a meaningful life and things like this. That, you know, it's there in all of us, and it's just a matter of bringing it to the surface.
Okay, but the problem is that he repeated the Shema of Israel. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. So he was a strict monotheist, one God. And then he goes ahead and claims uniquely to be God in human form. I mean, isn't he a candidate for a mental hospital at that point?
In today's society, most people would likely look at him that way, yes, but I don't think that, I mean, he wasn't hurting people. He wasn't, you know, he wasn't advocating slaughter of millions.
That's for sure.
He was just going around. He was living with the impoverished. He was living with, you know, prostitutes, and you know, he was with them, and he was showing them there's something better for you.
Good. Exactly. But my problem with what he says then is, he says, if you believe in me, you're going to heaven. If you reject me, you're going to hell. I mean, if you have a professor here at UCONN who teaches good teachings all semester long, then, lacking the persuasive skill to motivate you to study for his exam, he threatens you with expulsion from UCONN if you get below a 90. I would not call the dude a good teacher. I would call him a crass manipulator who, lacking the power to, or the persuasive skill to motivate you to study for his exam, he threatens you. I mean, would you call that good?
Probably not.
I'm with you.
Well, because what he was starting with was the basis of Judaism, which, I mean, of course, didn't have hell, but they did have the idea of God and the idea that, you know,
judgment.
And these
the
things,
prophets, right? The prophets talk about judgment.
But, and I'm venturing a little out of my territory here. I'm not that well versed.
No, you're doing well, sir. You're doing very well.
But, so there's his basis, and I think also you have to look at, I mean, let's see,
Let me take another tack. Okay. He claimed that he loves you so much that he went through the hell of the cross so that you would not go to hell, you'd go to heaven. Now, in light of the fact that he claimed to love you, the individual, that much, what would be the most appropriate way to respond to his love?
to accept it.
Good. So do you think that might be a wise decision, to accept his love and to put your faith in him?
You could definitely argue that. I don't think that necessarily you strictly have to follow him, though, because you can look at his stuff and you can say this guy was a smart guy. You know, I mean, he was a good guy. You know, and he taught people a very good way to live. But I don't think you necessarily have to say I'm all for everything that he is and everything that he was and everything that he did.
Okay, but when you read the Gospels, what you'll notice is they have a perverse fascination with his death on a cross. The Gospels are obviously not biographies. And when you read what Jesus taught, he kept on calling people to himself, to put their faith in him, not to put their faith in his teachings or his doctrines, but he kept on calling people, come to me, believe in me, trust in me. And he said the reason that that was so important was twofold. First of all, because of his identity, he really is God, and he's saying, come to me, the personal God, live in a spiritual relationship with me. And then secondly, he's saying, I bled and died on a cross to break the barrier that exists between you and God, because God is absolute good, and you are not absolute good, and you can't coexist. I bled and died on a cross to forgive you, to reconcile you, to restore you into a right relationship with God. You see how he calls us not so much to a philosophy, he calls us to himself, to trust in him personally, not just some ideas or a philosophy. Now, obviously, ideas and philosophy flow from it, but primarily he's calling us to him, to enter an I-thou relationship.